And so it's now time for our very final session, and we're going to have 3 quick presentations on sort of thoughts, ideas for future research. And so we are first going to have Mark, then we're going to have Eileen, and Alberto is going to end with this. But before that, just in order to improve communications, perhaps for future ideas and projects, we had the idea of sending around a list of email addresses of those that have participated to all the participants. And so I think that the most sensible way of doing this is, if you're uncomfortable with that, would be good if you could just send us an email saying, please don't include my email address, such that we don't just send around your contact details without your consent. With that out of the way, I think, Mark, the floor is yours. Tell us what you're thinking about.
Okay, cool, thanks. The slides there. Yeah. Oops. Okay, so I'll just dive right in. This is a combination of ideas from Casper and I. I want to speak a little bit about my motivation. So I do a lot of different kinds of research, but what I'm really personally interested in is studying improvements in well-being among people who are, in a sense, already quite well. So replacing GDP with something richer in very wealthy countries where GDP is no longer so useful, and studying kind of well-being among people who have very relaxed capabilities. So they're healthy, they're rich, etc. They're very well educated, but they don't seem to get that much satisfaction out of life. What's the story there? Is it meaning and purpose? Is it self-actualization? These kind of questions. And I think this raises a lot of difficulties. Anyway, I think in order to make progress in these kind of areas, what you're really interested in is intrapersonal change over time. And the methodology that I'm about to present is mostly about that, and not really making claims about interpersonal comparisons. Now, a major challenge when you're trying to do intrapersonal comparisons is recall bias and scale norming, and I think especially ceiling effects in the context of people who are already quite well off. Scale norming means that you can't really look at year-on-year levels in scale responses, and recall bias means you can't really ask the kind of thing where you're like, think back to how you were, are you better off now? In addition to unpacking scale norming and recall bias and these kind of things, or controlling for recall bias, I also want to unpack the reporting function and just understand it better. Now, the methodology that I'm about to present is inspired by vignettes, but I really want to allow values diversity. So instead of specifying a kind of life and the content of that life and then asking people to tell me how satisfied they would be with it, I want them to tell me different kinds of lives and the types of satisfaction they would get from each one. But that kind of methodology usually involves interviews, and that data then is very unwieldy and can't be analyzed in a sort of structured semi-quantitative way. So we try to bridge that gap. So we start by just asking people for a scale response about life satisfaction, and then we ask them to describe in 280 characters, which is a tweet or less per point, what each point on that scale means to them. So specifically, what kind of life would you need to be living in order to answer the corresponding number? Then we have this question where we are trying to figure out the amount of satisfaction that needs to change in order for them to move between the intervals on their scale. And we essentially give them 5 different ways that you could assign numbers to your scale. And we ask them to pick one that corresponds most accurately to, in a sense, their reporting function. So these are the 5 options. We would also give them an option for none of the above and I don't understand. And on the left-hand side, there's a little key that explains what the brackets mean. So on the top, you have like a linear reporting function, and then concave and convex, and then bunching in the middle and spreading out instead. So here we try to get some sense for the shape of their scale. At time 2, a year later, probably, we would then repeat these 3 questions. So we get their scale response again, get the description of their scale again as they understand it, and get them to identify the shape of their reporting function. Then we ask this sense check question that Grisha presented on. So would you say that you are more, less, or as satisfied are you with your life compared to last year? And then we really start to get into the scale norming stuff. So we show them the tweets and the scale shape that they specified at time 1. and we say, on this scale, what is your life satisfaction today? Then we show, still with that scale and tweets visible, we say, on this scale, what was your life satisfaction a year ago? Then we show them the tweet descriptions and the scale that they chose this year at the instance of this interview. And we say, here is your current scale and everything. On this scale, how satisfied were you with your life a year ago? And so I think this way we can sort of overcome recall bias because we show them the scale that they use. And we can also kind of sense check whether their life is getting better, how that's translated to the scale response, how that's translated to this question. And we can also get a rich sense for what things matter to people in their lives. And then finally, I have a quick kind of just asking people directly about scale norming. So I like the idea of taking subjects seriously. And I think there's a strong push within the subjective wellbeing research community to say, well, like, people can make good judgments about their life. But I think this is in tension with the view that people make good judgments about their life, but those judgments are riddled with biases that only we, the analysts, can control for. So rather than take that approach, I kind of more just want to put it directly to people. To what extent do you think your scale today is meaningfully the same as your scale from last year? And they can answer that on a Likert scale. And then how likely is it that your scale will change over the next 5 years such that it would not be meaningfully comparable to your scale today? And again, they can tell us information. And I think just a final point is to say that with these tweet descriptions, one thing that I hope to be able to do is to look at that the response shift effects that were mentioned yesterday, and start to think about those in terms of things like self-actualization and these ideas that some psychologists in particular think underpin subjective well-being. So I'd be very keen to hear thoughts on this method. Thanks.